I say I tripped on this idea. I went to see the Bacon exhibition of portraits. And there were a whole number of triptychs, and I thought it's really interesting his use of triptychs, and that got me onto trilogies and triads and triangles and threes. So a survey of figures of diagrams and structures. So by surveying this kind of arena of figures, there's a sort of persistence. Could someone read? Who can read?
Well, I can start, and then somebody with a better voice can follow.
Yeah.
The base of the pyramid is a triangle, and the lateral faces are also triangles. The net of a rectangular pyramid consists of one rectangle and four triangles. The triangle represents the soul, and it manifests a combination of love, intelligence, and will. It is also a form of cosmic mountain which endures time. The ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras revered the number three as the perfect number to represent harmony, wisdom, and understanding. Plato, 429 to 347, was taught by Socrates and taught Aristotle. His philosophy was based on the idea that reality was a reflection of ideal forms that were beyond space and time and therefore eternal. Plato used triangles to construct the four elements: earth, sky, water, and fire. The ceramic image shows Hercules in the process of capturing the three-headed dog Cerberus, who guards the gates of Hades, or Hades. It was one of his 12 labors. There is one surviving trilogy of ancient Greek plays, the Oresteia by Aeschylus, which consists of three tragedies. How do you pronounce the author there, Jonathan?
Uh, Achilles, I think.
Aeschylus, okay.
Achilles. Is that someone got a better pronunciation?
I think it's Aeschylus. Is it Aeschylus? That's how I've always heard it, but I could be wrong.
What's that again?
Aeschylus,
Aeschylus. Good.
Aeschylus.
but I really could be wrong. I don't know. That's how I've always heard it. But
You've
Okay.
heard it. Right.
The three main gods in the Hindu religion, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer, are each in turn often depicted with three different heads. Three-faced Shiva, Punjab, 4th century.
So Shiva has different manifestations, and often the three-headed show depict the different manifestations. Shiva destroyer, Shiva the dancing Shiva. Shiva is Bavara. Uh, so it takes on each of the gods take on different elements and have different relationships to animals. If you look carefully, is also represented as having a erect phallus.
E. Phav Hang, Guyanyan, Crane, and Gibbons, 13th century.
Is known as Muchi as well.
Gee, okay. Which, in this Chan Buddhist painting by Mu Chi, is predicated on the notion that there is continuation between all the different levels of being and that mind and nature are not separate entities. As such, it pointed toward a non dualistic conception of the world beyond any mechanical conception of space and time. Shakyamuni triad, Buddha attended by Manjushri and Samantabhadra, late 13th century, 14th century Yuan dynasty. Sengai, the universe, Edo period. The circle represents the infinite, which is the basis of all beings, the triangle the beginning of all forms, and the square is the triangle doubled and represents solidity. All three together represent the universe.
That's 18th century. It rather destroys the idea that abstraction was firstly a product of the West, of modernism.
But Jonathan, is that a little bit different? And this is using symbols to represent something, whereas you could argue that in pure abstract art that it's not using symbols per se.
I think you find both cases in European abstraction, in modernist abstraction. I don't think it's without some representational basis.
Okay, the word triptych comes from the Greek triptykos, which means three layers. The form originated in the Middle Ages as a way of adorning altarpieces of churches. Byzantine, icon of the Virgin and Child with saints, 10th century.
This is Sienese.
I think we should give somebody else the opportunity of reading now.
Who's next? There's a show coming up in the National Gallery next year of Sienese painting, which will be a Duccio painting. Siena was one of the main centres in the 14th century in Italy, one of the main city-states. Florentines went to war against them. Who can read? Someone new.
I can do it if you need.
Good.
Duccio, the Virgin and Child with St. Dominic and St. Aria and Patriarchs and Prophets in Siena, 1312 to 15. Madonna and Child enthroned with saints and angels, and Saints Anthony, Abbot, and Venantius, 1354. The relationship of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost is at the root of all Christian iconography. Andrei Rublev, The Trinity, early 15th century.
There's a film on Andrei Rublev.
Roger van der Weyden, Annunciation, 1434.
This is Northern Renaissance. Has anyone got a perception of the difference between Northern Renaissance and Southern Renaissance, Italian Renaissance and Low Countries? They're less ideal. Sort of, you get the Greek influence of ideal forms in Italian Renaissance art, whereas Northern is more, there's a sort of greater propensity towards realism.
Sorry, in the last one, how would you, because you've got this action going on in the middle and then the pregnant Mary on the right, and then how you, I don't know, and then this guy on the left. Do you feel like that? Sorry?
It's Annunciation, which is,
Yeah.
again, is persistent. One of the main subject matters of Renaissance art.
Yeah. But do you feel like because there's a kind of drama going on in the second and third, but on the first one, it's just kind of, this guy, is it the sponsor or something? I assume, I don't know what it is. But is there anything significant in that? No.
I mean, it's just a form they used, and they had a formula for what comes first and what is on the side.
Mhm.
So they add to don't really support. They support the central panel, but they don't really add to it very much.
Mhm. Okay.
Whereas this is radically um, used as a triptych in a really interesting way.
Gosh, that Garden of Earthly Delights, 1494 to 1505, Earth, Heaven, and Hell.
This painting's in Madrid, in the Prado.
The three different ages of man with the three different animal heads. Titian, Allegory of Prudence, painted in the 1660s.
This, for some reason, wasn't really included in his final listing of paintings. It was listed later, as if it was experimental or provisional, towards the end of his life. These are the three critiques of Kant.
Yeah, Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, Critique of Practical Reason, Critique of Judgment. And then they're in 1781, 1788, and 1790. Immanuel Kant was the central figure in modern philosophical thought, and his three critiques stand as his synthesis of his overall undertaking of advancing human autonomy as the final end of nature. The critiques opened the advent of the epoch of criticism, and with this, a turn towards the centrality of the subject.
So it's a subjective turn of philosophy. But it's a sort of, I mean, of all the publications of the Enlightenment, that was probably the most important.
Kant divided the mind into three main faculties: cognition, desire, and feeling. They each in turn generate representations. Cognition, how things are; desire, how things ought to be; and feeling, pleasure or displeasure. Hegel developed his dialectical method around a triadic structure of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. When you say that this, maybe that's just too big a question. Sorry, that's probably not helpful. Hegel employs a term sublation, which has three different distinct meanings that can be used separately from each other as pairings, and in some circumstances altogether. The meanings are to raise or lift up, to annul or suspend, and to save and preserve.
Also, his theory of imagination is triadic.
Freud developed a triadic structure of the self, which consisted of the id, ego, and superego.
For Kant.
Lacan divided the subject into three registers: the symbolic, which relates to language and structure; the imaginary, the realm of the image; illusion and ambivalence, and the real that points to a zone beyond representation or outside of language. They have a dynamic relationship to each other, and these terms become subject to revisions over time.
So that's a diagrammatic representation of the interrelationship of the imaginary, symbolic, and the real. It's dynamic, it moves and cross relates. You get the symptom in the centre.
Samuel Beckett produced a trilogy of his writing, Molly, 1950. Is it Molloy or Molly? I can't remember.
Molly.
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 Molly, 1951. Malone dies, and the unnameable, which presents a condition beyond conclusion. It is the role of objects to restore silence. Samuel Beckett, quote from the trilogy. Paul Auster, the New York trilogy. The New York trilogy exploits the elements of standard detective fiction in order to discover new ways of presenting interconnected narratives. It is composed of The City of Glass, Ghosts, and The Locked Room. Does someone else want to read?
Someone else take over. Yeah.
In the end, each life is no more than the sum of contingent facts, a chronicle of chance intersections, of flukes, of random events that divulge nothing but their own lack of purpose. Paul Auster, The New York Trilogy. A pre-established notion of the function or design of a trilogy in either novels or film scripts is that there should be a progression towards a conclusion. But in both these cited cases, there is rather a refusal of any such investment in such a schema. Instead, there is a refusal to deliver an ending, as if the very format presents an impossibility of such artifice. Rodchenko Red, Yellow and Blue, 1921. Rodchenko reduced painting to its least possible condition and with this declared painting to be all over. The gesture of the end of painting is coupled with the sense that it is also the religion of art that is in question. Max Beckmann, Departure, 1932 to 33.
It was literally trying to depart from the Nazis.
Max Beckmann, The Actors, 1942.
This is when he's in exile.
Max Beckmann, Blind Man's Buff, 1945. This is one of 5 pictures created while in exile in Holland between 1937 to 1947. Max Beckmann and Francis Bacon were the most persistent artists in their employment of the triptych structure. This structure alludes to both the medieval and the Renaissance periods, but enables the connotations of the religious symbolism to assume either allegorical or symbolic meaning that links to the departure of God and the disenchantment of the world. 3 studies for figures at the base of a crucifixion, 1944. Rhythms are the only characters, the only figures. The triptych's function is precisely to this point, to make evident what might otherwise risk remaining hidden. Gilles Deleuze. Francis Bacon, 3 studies for a portrait of Isabel Rosethron, 1965. In Bacon's painting, 3 studies of a portrait of Isabel Rosethron, 1965, there is a deeply felt encounter with the human subject that articulates a difference between a portrait and the depiction of a head, flesh, bone, spirit. This triptych opens out not only being in time and a being of something, but also in the way it opens, discharges the sense of being intuitively raw. It is thereby a subject in process, or to employ a Hegelian term, a subject sublated, suspended, abolished, elevated. It is the combination of being in time, but also the mobilization of a movement of a triad of figures that creates a reverberation with the image, not just in time, but also as an entrance into different registers in the process of becoming other. Francis Bacon, Triptych, 1944. Einstein, Battleship of Potemkin,
Temkin.
Potemkin, 1925. Short A plus short B equal to idea C. Einstein outlines a montage theory, a theory of editing, which attempts to apply the Marxist dialectic to the editing of shots together. As its core, this dialectical theory of montage suggests that shot A and I, edited together with shot B, water, does not just produce the sum of its parts, wet eye, but a synthesis of the two according to the logic of the dialectic. Something more than the sum of its parts, an idea crying. Abel Gance, Napoleon, 1927. Walter Benjamin developed a viewpoint on history based upon the principle of montage. This is rooted in his notion of the dialectical image, which opens out the play between time and the image in ways that create some mutability of all relationships, which might have appeared as fixed in a binary logic. The Apu trilogy by Satyajit Ray is a coming-of-age narrative consisting of 3 distinct temporal episodes. Pather Panchali, Aparajito, and the world of Apu.
He mainly used amateur actors. Very low budget film, but one which very moving. This is life in West Bengal.
In the film Doctor Strangelove, 1964, by Stanley Kubrick, the actor Peter Sellers plays three different parts, switching from one character to the next with dark comic effect. With this undertaking, the different characters are afforded their own distinct relationship to the space of narrative development, but that lack the feeling of autonomy within this. External forces increasingly control situations to the extent that all the characters are marching quickly step into an accident which will annihilate the world. This annihilation by the big object, the nuclear bomb, follows from a smaller scale annihilation of the various objects who are in lack of the means to avert this outcome. The dynamism of Sellers playing three roles thus opens the void in each of them, in which the outcome of an accident unfolds. This is a sign of stupidity rather than tragic fate, as no redemptive turn is offered as a possibility. A story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. Jean-Luc Godard. Still from the film, 2 or 3 things I know about her. Neither an art nor a technique, a mystery. Jean-Luc Godard opened out his employment of montage through a combination of optical figurations, affective encounters, and the employment of concepts. The surface of his films fold together these different registers of image, voice, and sound into a series of unexpected encounters. Pier Paolo Pasolini created his trilogy of life that adapted 3 medieval literary works, the Decameron, 1971, the Canterbury Tales, 1972, and the Arabian Nights, 1975.
The Arabian Nights.
Pasolini believed that cinema creates its own signifying practice that released poetic expression. With this, he utilized the free, indirect point of view in his depiction of scenarios that articulated psychological depths behind the more explicit thematic. He also created a polemic about the conceptual relationship between editing and death, still from Arabian Nights. A theory of cinema is not about cinema, but about the concepts that cinema gives rise to and which are themselves related to other concepts corresponding to other practices. The practice of concepts in general have no other privilege over others, any more than one object has over others. Cinema's concepts are not given in cinema, Deleuze. The Godfather was a trilogy that chronicled the life of the Corleone family. The first part is between 1945 to 1955, establishing in the process the main character of Michael Corleone, who is the dominant force in part 11 and part 111. He is shown to expand the business empire, but finally is trapped and undone by forces beyond his control. The format of the trilogy enables the narrative to assume epic proportions and to become in turn a historical meditation, not just on one central character, but on an important aspect of American capitalism. It weaves together a psychological study with the social forces which gave rise to an historical overview. We are finally left with an image of complete loneliness. Three Colors is a trilogy of films by Krzysztof Kiełowski, consisting of Three Colors Blue 1993, Three Colors White 1994, and Three Colors Red 1994. It was also co-production between France, Poland, and Switzerland. The three films draw the relationship to the color of the French flag and the symbolism of liberty, equality, and the fraternity. On the surface, the films strike both a tragic and comic tone, but also in ways that cut into the dramas. This invests the film with a sense of unfolding against the grain.
And blue. And white. And red.
A flag of a nation which different faces colored by its design, of moods collecting with gestures opening as if to announce the advent of the cinematic event. A triadic set of relationship with the movement of three subjects and their collected objects of attention, at times obscure, at other times in and of the light of the day. Flag, color, face folded. Joel Peter Whitkin, agonist of the eternal weight, 1990. Bill Viola, Nantes Triptych, 1992. The moving image work of Bill Viola invariably draws upon historical presentational structures, such as the triptych of iconography of religious painting. The Nantes Triptych portrays the staging of birth, life, and death. As an aesthetic approach, it attempts to draw together memory and symbolism with the technological interfacing of the image. One and Three Chairs by Joseph Kosuth, 1965, introduces tautology as a way of structuring the idea of art. Ai Weiwei, dropping a Han Dynasty urn, 1995. Daniel Gustav Kramer produced a series of landscape photographs, which consist of woodland, mountain, and underwater sets without finality. John Akomfra's film installation Vertigo Sea, 2015, fuses together images of the slave trade, whaling, migration with the idea of the yet to come. There is a vast sweep with both scale and memory pertaining to the relationship of geography and history. Of these last four examples, which employ a triadic structure, Kossuth and Ai Weiwei both are examples of highly reductive, iconoclastic, but speculative usage that document an idea. In opposition to this, Kramer and Akomfra demonstrate an expansive intuitive usage, so have a completely different and opposing aesthetic logic. The triangulation of the principle of reality opens out viewpoints beyond binary modes of being. Instead, we are offered to a staging of presentation, predicted either to a principle of becoming or to the notion of eternal forms that go beyond ordinary conceptions of space and time. In philosophical terms, this would amount to the difference between idealism and monism. Speculation. This study originated from a viewing of the Francis Bacon portrait exhibition and the extent of the employment of the triptych format in his overall body of work. The question that began to surface was to what extent was it a theatrical device, and to what extent was it critical? As a consequence of trying to examine this, the survey of the question raised broader configurations related to structures that originate in ancient or archaic culture and persist into late modernity, if only as a form of rhetoric or irony. For Bacon, there is a setting apart from the figures of reiterated modernity, and so it assumed a gesture that was a mark of difference.
Thank you. No questions or discussions? I mean, it's an essay on the subject rather than a thesis.
It feels like the triptych format has more possibility for storytelling because it's always feeling that it has a beginning, a process, and an end. but not necessarily to be which is which.
In a way, Bacon doesn't use it in a narrative way. It's a way of opening up. It's definitely a way of opening up temporality.
And Jonathan, just maybe taking Bacon's painting and some of the triptychs that he's painted, is there something about the combination of three that gives it more synergy or energy or intensity?
Well, I feel that he's using it as an anti-modernist device.
So is an anti-what device?
Modernist.
Anti-whatness?
Modernist is saying I'm not modernist.
Oh, anti-modernist device, yeah.
Is it like in the meantime also anti-classic?
It's anti-classic as well.
Both
Anti-mimetic.
romantic.
So it's a dual gesture. It's a gesture against modernity, but it's also against religious iconography. But it uses the aura of religious iconography. There's a sort of grandeur at times to his, which he undercuts. It turns him into um, abjects. So he destroys the triptych from within. But I think his triptych of portraits is like saying there's no one final portrait, there's no one definitive statement. It's a process of a loop of becoming.
I don't know if this is of interest or relevance, but and also I'm going to misremember what I actually say, which doesn't help. But I wonder if there's also a kind of cognitive aspect, because your presentation, Jonathan, kind of encompassed Pythagoras and the idea of holy trinity in 500 BC Greece, all the way through Christianity, including different variants of Buddhism and different cultures. There seemed to be something kind of universally interesting about triads, triptychs. And I think I'm kind of correct in saying that the way that the human brain thinks about numbers, we can see, if we kind of walk into a room and there are three objects, a human can recognize that there are three objects. It's something which is almost kind of like, you know, rapid access memory or something. It's something that we instantly perceive. But if there are more than 4, so there's a sort of 3-4 threshold that we can sort of see and think, okay, there are 3 of them, there are 4 of them. That's slightly variant from person to person. But then if it's 5, 6, 7, you actually have to start kind of going through a cognitive process of kind of counting. And there are some, I think there's one language, the Piraha language from South America, which has a number system which has 1, 2, 3, and many. And so I wonder whether there's something about 3, even at almost like a fundamental neurological level, which is it's something that we can hold 3 concepts fully in our mind and kind of almost like leave them there, placed in our mind, and then we can start to make these kind of complex, open-ended engagements that you talk about in some people's work, and then the more kind of reductive, kind of complete network that you talk about in some other people's work. But there seems to, I don't know, I was trying to sort of think, well, you know, we have couplets and we have duologies and there are quartets, but they're kind of rarer as well. There seems to be something, yeah, I wonder whether we have a almost mechanical faculty for holding 3 in our brain of a particular notion and then make relationships between them, and that contributes to the power of the triple.
Offers the possibility of dynamism, another dynamism. So in Lacan's imaginary, symbolic, and the real, it's a sort of fluid relationship between the 3 faculties. So it's dynamic.
There's in physics, there's something called, I think Newton came, Newton, I think so, the 3-body problem. And I think that relates to the sun, the moon, and the earth, and the idea that in terms of dynamism, the gravitational movement between, say, the earth and the moon can be kind of calculated. But once you bring in a 3rd object, the different kind of relations and forces and pressures and pulls between all 3, one-on-one, etc., makes it impossible to do that calculation. And then I think that idea of the 3-body problem became the title for a very best-selling, relatively contemporary Chinese science fiction book. But yeah, certainly things become more complicated when 3 are involved.
Any more questions or thoughts? I mean, they're very persistent over thousands of years of cultural form. There's a persistence to try it. It can.
I guess in my experience as a scientist or mathematician, we typically would, when setting about solving problems or systems, count 1, 2, infinity, and all the numbers in between. We skip them since they usually involve tremendously difficult problems. And these three special cases are the ones that usually turn out to be simple due to some boundary cases and some symmetry of those problems. And the three-body problem is a differential equation that we can't analytically solve. That this is a perfect example of the same, but there are many throughout science. It's very common not to get one's hands dirty with problems involving three or more. But I think that's also the case in philosophy, to be honest. I mean, most of the philosophies seem to go 1 to infinity. We don't often worry about maybe 3 is a special case, but on the whole, we go 1. Actually, probably go 1 infinity. I'm not sure we even have a 2. I guess we're kind of thinking that 3 is an example of the multiple that is not finite infinite. It covers a whole class of other similar things. Anyway, that's my thinking of my scientific background. I guess there's also something very special about the triangle for the Pythagoreans, frankly, given that it's through the triangle they discovered the irrational number, which was very significant in the history of philosophy and mathematics. I think somehow that this comes out of the triangle, so the 3. I think that was very important to the Pythagoreans, at least.
Any other questions? Anyone been to see any shows?
I was in Paris a little while ago, and Art Bath was the big Art Bath show. It was wonderful. There was also there is an early sorry, I forgot his name for a minute. It's gone blank. Oh, sorry, it'll come back. I can't think. Anyway, the Art Bath I thought was wonderful. Don't think I've ever seen anything of that scale in that particular. But I don't think I've seen very much of that work, except in books. I don't remember many exhibitions in that. It's really wonderful.
I'm in San Francisco now, and I went to SF MoMA the other day. There's one thing that caught my attention. Gabriel Orozco has the 4 ping pong tables with kind of small pond water feature in the middle. So think about 4 half moons separate with a square inside. So people are supposed to play ping pong across this water feature. And then world, you know, how his sort of half moon painting shape, sort of abstract stuff was on the wall as well. Perhaps I can put again, very short presentation at some point. I thought it was very playful and inviting participating. What was the idea of it? I remember. I thought it was the most things in MoMA.
How long are you in America for?
I don't think she heard you, Jonathan.
How long are you in America for?
Oh, I'm leaving this evening, going back to New Zealand. I was here for a week, catching up with all the school friends, and we saved the MoMA for the rainy day, which was about Wednesday, so we spent whole day. You've been to San Francisco, MoMA? They got
No.
quite good collection of also Kelly, Agnes Martin, Cy Tombury, all those names that you will think. Helen Frankenthaler, small version of Kusama's Infinity Room, small installation of Kara Walker with all those black figures. Alexander Calder's mobiles. And my favorite, Julie Merritt's huge paintings at the entrance, welcoming people coming in. It was good whole day place. 7-story building. So you can start from 7th floor coming down, and there are 2 outdoor area with some sort of sculpture, small sculpture garden sort of thing. Also 1 or 2 pieces of Annie Albers tapestry. It's pretty much modern and contemporary, so pretty much abstract everywhere. I think 1 or 2 of Rothko as well.
Yeah, I also saw in Paris was the other one I was thinking of was an exhibition of early Pollock at the Picasso Museum, which is quite interesting. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, it's well known that Pollock was heavily influenced by Picasso early on. It's very interesting to see a lot of those early works which I haven't seen before. It's very interesting.
Also, San Francisco MoMA has a good collection of German painters. So, of course, Gerhard Richter, his earlier photo-like blur portraits, and then his color arrangement thing, and then his very massed, huge color thing where he used a big sponge to go across. Quite a few of those. Also, Richard Long's Cornish stones, how he arranged the stones on the floor. just on top of mind, those things were displayed.
So anyone got an idea for next week?
Yes, it'll be our last session before the end of year dinner.
This is the last session, is it? Dinner
Next week is.
Before the dinner. So after the dinner, do we still have course going?
New Year.
Do you have a PowerPoint about diptych?
About what?
Diptych.
Diptych? No. I'm just working on one on memory.
Memory is a good one.
I'll try and get it done for next week.